For nearly 2 decades, they were Hollywood's golden couple, a perfect testament to love's resilience against impossible odds. Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban seemed to have it all: a fairy tale romance, 2 beautiful children, red carpet glamour, and a story that inspired millions. But behind the carefully curated photographs and public declarations of devotion lay a marriage that was quietly suffocating under the weight of unspoken resentment, conflicting needs, and a promise that neither could keep. In September 2025, Nicole Kidman filed for divorce, and the world was shocked. What shocked many even more was what happened next. Keith Urban's immediate and devastated response revealed that the marriage had long been dying, and the painful truth that neither wanted to acknowledge had finally come to light. This is the story of how Hollywood's most admired couple became an unforgettable cautionary tale about the difference between looking like you have it all and actually having what matters. The world did not see this coming. When Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban announced their separation, social media erupted with shock and disbelief. Fans who had followed their relationship for nearly 20 years struggled to understand how a couple who seemed so devoted, so committed to fighting for their love despite endless challenges, could simply walk away. But for those who had paid close attention over the years, who noticed the subtle shifts in their public appearances, the way they spoke about each other in interviews that felt more like duty than desire, the growing distance visible even in carefully filtered photographs, there were signs. The question was never whether this marriage would end. The question was when and how painfully. This is not a simple story of 2 people who fell out of love. This is something far more complex and deeply human. It is a story about sacrifice and resentment, about dreams that don't align, about the devastating consequences of trying to save someone who doesn't want to be saved, and about the profound loneliness that can exist within even the most celebrated partnerships. It is a story that began with genuine love and genuine hope, but was ultimately undone by fundamental incompatibilities that no amount of devotion, wealth, fame, or public support could overcome. To understand how Nicole and Keith arrived at this moment, we must first understand who they were individually, the wounds they carried, the dreams they pursued, and the fears that would eventually tear them apart. Nicole Mary Kidman was born on June 20, 1967, in Honolulu, Hawaii, to an Australian psychologist and a nursing educator. From her earliest days, Nicole was shaped by her parents' intellectualism and their devotion to humanitarian causes. The family moved to Australia when she was 4 years old, and it was there that Nicole first discovered acting, a world where she could transform herself, where she could be someone else, where control was possible through preparation and skill. She was not the most naturally outgoing child. Instead, she was thoughtful, observant, and driven by a fierce need to excel. By her teenage years, Nicole had already begun to distinguish herself as an actress, starring in Australian television before transitioning to international cinema. Her big break came in the late 1980s and 1990s, with iconic roles in films like Dead Calm and Far and Away. But the role that would define her career and her personal life came in 2000 when she starred in Moulin Rouge. Alongside Tom Cruise, the two fell in love on set, and their relationship became one of Hollywood's most glamorous and most scrutinized partnerships. They married in 2003 and adopted 2 children together, including Isabella Jane and Connor Cruise. For many years, they seemed like the ultimate power couple. But that marriage ended in divorce in 2001, and the custody battle that followed devastated Nicole. She lost primary custody of her children to Tom, a pain that never truly healed. In interviews years later, she would speak about the regret, the guilt, and the way that loss shaped everything she did afterward. Nicole became determined that if she ever had a chance at motherhood again, she would not lose it. She would be more devoted, more present, more controlling of the circumstances that could tear her family apart. This wound, this profound fear of losing her children again, would become the defining force in her personal relationships for the rest of her life. Keith Lionel Urban was born on October 26, 1977, in Auckland, New Zealand, but grew up in Caboolture, Queensland, Australia. Unlike Nicole's intellectually rigorous household, Keith grew up in a working-class family with a father who was also a musician. Music was not a luxury in Keith's life, it was oxygen. By age 6, he was already playing guitar. by his teenage years, he was performing professionally. Keith's childhood was marked by a passionate intensity and a drive to create that seemed to come from somewhere deep within his soul. His early 20s saw him moving to Nashville and breaking into country music, eventually becoming one of the genre's biggest international stars. He won Grammy Awards, sold millions of albums, and earned the respect of his peers for his technical skill and emotional authenticity. But Keith's life was also marked by something else: a susceptibility to addiction. In his 20s, he struggled with alcohol and drugs, battles that he eventually confronted by entering rehab in 1998. For several years, he remained sober and focused, seemingly having conquered his demons. Keith's worldview was fundamentally different from Nicole's. Where she sought control and stability, he sought freedom and spontaneity. Where she wanted to manage every variable to ensure safety, he wanted to take risks and trust that things would work out. He was an artist first, a family man second. Not out of cruelty, but because his music was the truest expression of himself. He believed that protecting your marriage meant allowing your partner's space to grow, even when that growth meant time apart, uncertainty, and the kind of vulnerability that Nicole had learned to fear. In 2005, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban's paths crossed at a formal event in New York City. By this time, both were established stars in their own right, living in different worlds. Nicole was in her late 30s, having spent years rebuilding her career and her sense of self after her divorce from Tom Cruise. She had achieved tremendous success, critical acclaim, and a degree of independence that many women could only dream of. But underneath that success was a deep loneliness, a hunger for genuine connection, and a fear that her past failures in love might be inevitable. Keith, at 27, was a decade younger, at the height of his creative powers, and riding the wave of his music career's unprecedented success. He was charming, talented, and possessed the kind of raw authenticity that comes from pouring your pain and joy directly into your art. He was also, in many ways, still the boy who had learned to survive through addiction and recovery, someone who understood pain, who had rebuilt himself, and who believed deeply in second chances and the redemptive power of love. When they met, something clicked. Nicole was drawn to Keith's vulnerability and his talent. Keith was captivated by Nicole's sophistication, her intelligence, and the way she seemed to understand him without judgment. She was not threatened by his past struggles with addiction. Instead, she saw an opportunity, a chance to be with someone who had already hit bottom and chosen recovery, someone she believed she could help, protect, and build a stable life with. For the first time since her divorce, Nicole allowed herself to imagine a second chance at real love. Keith saw in Nicole a woman of substance, someone who was not just beautiful but brilliant, someone whose presence elevated him and made him feel like his struggles had meaning. They began dating, and the chemistry was immediate and electric. Friends of both remarked on how quickly they seemed to fall in love, how obvious it was that this was different, that this was real. What happened next surprised no one who knew Nicole Kidman's psychological makeup. Within months, she was ready to marry. This was not impulsiveness, it was strategy. Nicole wanted to secure this relationship, to formalize it, to make it official and binding. Marriage represented safety, commitment, and a kind of legal and social permanence that she desperately needed. In June 2006, less than a year after they met, Nicole and Keith married in an intimate ceremony in Sydney. By all accounts, they were genuinely happy. Nicole was euphoric. She had found love again. She had a partner. And more importantly, she was about to become a mother again. They were planning to have children together, to build a family. For a woman who had lived with the trauma of losing custody of her children, this was everything. She threw herself into the role of wife and future mother with the same intensity and dedication that she brought to every other part of her life. Keith, too, seemed committed. He spoke in interviews about how Nicole had changed his life, how being with her made him want to be a better person, how grateful he was to have found someone who understood him. In the early months of their marriage, they were inseparable. They attended events together, they traveled together, and they presented to the world the image of a couple who had found something rare and beautiful. But within months, cracks began to show. In 2007, just months after their wedding, Keith Urban checked into a rehabilitation facility. The official reason given was a relapse related to his previous struggles with alcohol and drug addiction. What should have been a private medical matter became international news, splashed across tabloids and celebrity gossip outlets around the world. For Nicole, the shock was profound. She had believed, perhaps needed to believe, that Keith's addiction was something from his past, something he had conquered and moved beyond. But the truth was far more complicated. Addiction is not something that is ever truly conquered. It is something that must be managed, constantly, for a lifetime. And in the context of a new marriage, the pressure of fame, and the stress of building a life together, Keith's old demons had resurfaced. Nicole later said in interviews that this moment was when she first realized that her marriage would be defined by crisis management, by vigilance, and by the constant fear that Keith might relapse. But rather than end the marriage, Nicole did something different. She doubled down. She committed herself to being Keith's anchor, his stability, his reason to stay sober. She told herself a story that she needed to believe, that love, devotion, and commitment could overcome addiction, that if she was devoted enough, present enough, and strong enough, she could keep Keith safe. This was her second chance at love, and she would not let it fail. When Keith emerged from rehab, the couple presented themselves to the world with a different narrative. They were not a marriage in crisis. They were a love story that was strong enough to survive even addiction. They were proof that with dedication and commitment, a couple could overcome anything. In interviews, they spoke about their renewed dedication to each other, about how this experience had brought them closer, about how their love had been tested and had emerged stronger. The truth, however, was more complicated. What had actually happened was that Nicole had accepted a new role in her marriage, not as an equal partner, but as a guardian, a monitor, and a protector. She began to manage Keith's schedule, his social connections, and his exposure to situations that might trigger a relapse. This was not malicious. It came from a place of genuine care and genuine fear. But it also set a pattern that would define their marriage for the next 18 years. After Keith's stint in rehab, Nicole and Keith's marriage seemed to stabilize. They announced that they were expecting their first child together, and in 2008, their daughter Sunday Rose was born. 2 years later, in 2010, their son Faith was born. For Nicole, these were the most joyful moments of her life since losing custody of her previous children. She had her family back. She had her second chance. But something subtle had shifted in the dynamic between Nicole and Keith. Where once there had been equal partnership, there was now a hierarchy. Nicole was the keeper of sobriety, the guardian of stability. Keith, despite his talent and his success, had become someone who needed to be managed. He began to resent this dynamic, even as he appreciated Nicole's devotion. In interviews from this period, listeners can detect a subtle resentment in his voice when discussing his wife, a guardedness that had not been there before. Meanwhile, Nicole threw herself into motherhood with the same intensity she brought to everything else. She was present, devoted, protective, perhaps overly so. She wanted to control every aspect of her children's lives to ensure they would be safe, that they would not suffer the loss and trauma that she had experienced. This need for control, which had begun as a response to Keith's addiction, began to extend to every aspect of their family life. Throughout the 2010s, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban became masters of the public performance. They had learned how to construct an image that the world wanted to see. A couple who had weathered storms, who had survived addiction and come out stronger, who were devoted partners and devoted parents. They appeared together at award shows, walked red carpets with practiced ease, and gave interviews where they spoke about each other with words that sounded right, even as something essential had changed. But behind closed doors, their marriage was becoming increasingly strained. Keith's career continued to flourish. He toured extensively, performed at major venues around the world, and maintained his status as one of country music's biggest stars. This success, however, required him to spend months away from home each year. For Nicole, who had structured her life around control and presence, these absences were a constant source of anxiety and resentment. She worried about what Keith was doing when he was away, about whether he was staying sober, about whether he was truly committed to their family. Keith, for his part, began to feel suffocated. He resented the constant check-ins, the questions about his whereabouts, the sense that he was being monitored like a child rather than treated like an adult and equal partner. He loved his children deeply, but he also needed space to breathe, to create, to be the person he was when he was on stage performing music. The very thing that made him attractive to Nicole, his artistic sensitivity, his emotional depth, his need for freedom, had become the source of her anxiety and his resentment. Their parenting philosophies, too, began to diverge more sharply. Nicole wanted structure, discipline, and controlled environments for their children. She wanted to protect them from the chaos and unpredictability that had marked her own life and Keith's past. Keith, having grown up in a more loose and creative household, wanted his children to have freedom to explore, to make mistakes, to learn from experience rather than from parental warnings. These were not fundamental disagreements about love or commitment. They were fundamental disagreements about how to live. By the mid-2010s, those who paid close attention began to notice something significant. Nicole and Keith were rarely photographed together anymore at industry events. Where once they had attended galas and premieres as a unit, now they often appeared separately. Nicole would walk a red carpet for one of her film premieres without Keith. Keith would attend music industry events alone. They had developed separate social circles, separate professional lives, and increasingly, separate spheres of existence. In interviews during this period, the change in how they spoke about each other became increasingly apparent. When asked about their marriage, both would offer practiced, almost scripted responses that emphasized commitment and partnership. But listeners could detect something missing: the genuine warmth, the specific details, the personal anecdotes that couples who are truly connected naturally share. Instead, their answers became more generic, more measured, as if they were describing a business arrangement rather than a marriage. Friends close to the couple later revealed that by the late 2010s, they were living increasingly separate lives. Nicole maintained their primary residence and was deeply involved in the day-to-day care of their children. Keith spent significant time in Nashville for his music career, maintaining an apartment there and surrounding himself with musicians and collaborators who understood the artistic lifestyle. They saw each other on weekends and during holidays, but the daily intimacy that characterizes most marriages had largely evaporated. This separation was not dramatic. There were no public fights, no scandals, no moments where the carefully constructed facade cracked visibly. Instead, it was a slow, quiet drift. The kind of distance that builds over years when two people have fundamental incompatibilities that they have chosen not to address directly. They were like actors who had become so skilled at playing the role of the happy couple that they could no longer access the real emotions underneath. Throughout their marriage, Keith's sobriety remained a complex and often unspoken issue. While there were no public revelations of major relapses after 2007, Keith's struggle with addiction was an ever-present undercurrent in their relationship. In interviews, he spoke about the daily work of maintaining sobriety, about the temptations that never fully disappeared, and about how grateful he was for Nicole's support. But this gratitude came tinged with a subtle resentment. Gratitude for being saved, but also resentment at being saved. Nicole, meanwhile, carried the burden of being the sober companion in her marriage. She was hypervigilant about Keith's behavior, worried constantly about whether he was truly committed to sobriety, and bore the emotional weight of feeling responsible for maintaining his recovery. This burden, combined with her other responsibilities as a mother and as a major Hollywood actress, began to wear on her mental health. In some interviews from this period, she spoke about anxiety and the stress of maintaining her various roles. The irony was that Keith's sobriety was real. He was committed to recovery and to not using drugs or alcohol. But Nicole's need to monitor and manage that sobriety, born from her own trauma and fears, had created a dynamic where Keith could never fully prove himself trustworthy enough. No matter how long he stayed sober, no matter how committed he was to recovery, there was always the implicit assumption that he could relapse at any moment, and that he needed to be watched. As the 2020s began, the cracks in Nicole and Keith's marriage became increasingly visible, even to casual observers. The COVID-19 pandemic initially forced them to spend more time together, as tours were canceled and travel was restricted. This enforced togetherness, rather than bringing them closer, only highlighted how little they had in common anymore, how much they had grown into different people. After lockdowns ended and Keith's touring resumed, the pattern of separation resumed as well. By 2023 and 2024, they were rarely seen together at public events. When they did appear together, their body language was notably distant. They did not touch, did not make eye contact, did not display the physical affection that had once been a hallmark of their public appearances. To those who followed celebrity culture closely, it was clear that this marriage was in its final stages. In interviews, both began to speak more carefully about their relationship, as if they were negotiating what they could and could not say. Keith, in particular, became more guarded in his answers, and his music from this period became notably more introspective and melancholic. Fans who listened closely to his lyrics detected themes of loneliness, of feeling trapped, and of yearning for freedom. Nicole, meanwhile, threw herself even more intensely into her career and her children. She gave fewer interviews about her personal life, and when she did, she seemed tired, emotionally exhausted by the performance of maintaining a marriage that had fundamentally broken down. By the summer of 2025, it had become clear to everyone close to Nicole and Keith that their marriage was essentially over. They were going through the motions, maintaining the appearance of togetherness for the sake of their children and their public images, but there was no real partnership left. They were two people living parallel lives, occasionally intersecting at family events and holidays, but fundamentally disconnected from one another. For Nicole, the final realization came quietly. She had spent nearly 2 decades trying to save Keith, trying to manage his recovery, trying to be enough for him. She had sacrificed her own needs, her own peace of mind, and her own emotional well-being in service of maintaining a marriage that had become unsustainable. She was exhausted. She was resentful. And most importantly, she had come to understand that no amount of love or devotion on her part could change the fundamental truth. They wanted different things, and they could not build a life together that satisfied both of their deepest needs. Keith, meanwhile, had come to a different realization. He had spent 18 years feeling monitored, managed, and mistrusted. Despite his genuine commitment to his family and his sobriety, he had never been able to prove himself trustworthy enough in Nicole's eyes. The constant vigilance, the questions, the implied doubt, these had worn him down. He had begun to understand that staying in this marriage meant accepting a life of constant scrutiny and suspicion, and that was a price he was no longer willing to pay. In September 2025, Nicole made the decision. She filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. The statement was brief, professional, and carefully worded. It did not attack Keith. It did not air grievances. It simply stated the legal fact. This marriage could no longer continue. Nicole's team managed the announcement with precision, releasing a statement that emphasized her commitment to co-parenting and her hope for a peaceful resolution. As we continue this story, you're watching the moment when a carefully constructed public image begins to shatter. If you're enjoying this deep dive into what really happened behind closed doors, please consider subscribing to see more stories like this, and feel free to leave a comment below with your thoughts. What happened next shocked the entertainment world. Within hours of the divorce announcement becoming public, Keith Urban did something that his publicist almost certainly advised against. He removed his wedding ring. Not quietly, not privately, but publicly, appearing without it at an event where photographers were present, making a statement without saying a word. But the most powerful moment came just days later, when Keith performed at a concert in Nashville. As he took the stage, his face was drawn, his eyes red-rimmed, and his entire body language radiated pain. When he reached a particular song in his setlist, a love song that he had performed thousands of times, he changed the lyrics. Where he had once sung about forever and commitment and devotion, he now sang about loss, about endings, and about the price of love. The audience fell silent. Many wept. Videos of the performance spread across social media within hours, and in those few minutes, Keith Urban revealed more truth about his marriage than he and Nicole had revealed in 18 years of public appearances together. In the days and weeks that followed, Keith gave interviews where he spoke with an openness and vulnerability that was shocking to those who had followed his career. He did not blame Nicole. He did not attack her or reveal intimate details. But he made clear that he had been deeply unhappy, that he had felt misunderstood and mistrusted, and that while he still loved Nicole and would always be grateful for the family they had built together, staying in the marriage had been destroying him. The public response was swift and revealing. Fans and observers who had long sensed that something was wrong with the couple's relationship suddenly felt validated. Social media erupted with discussions about what his performances and interviews actually revealed, that their marriage had been a performance, that their public image had been a carefully constructed lie, and that beneath the fairy tale, there had been profound unhappiness on both sides. As the dust began to settle, a clearer picture emerged of what had actually happened in Nicole and Keith's marriage. It was not a story of a bad person and a good person. It was not a story of betrayal or infidelity or dramatic cruelty. Instead, it was a story of two fundamentally incompatible people who loved each other but could not live together, who had made sacrifices that ultimately were not sustainable, and who had constructed an elaborate public performance to hide a private reality that neither wanted to acknowledge. Nicole's need for control and stability, born from her trauma of losing custody of her children, had created an environment where Keith never felt trusted or respected as an adult. Keith's need for freedom and autonomy, born from his own psychology and his artistic nature, had created situations where Nicole felt anxious and afraid. Neither was wrong. Neither was evil. But together, they had created a dynamic that was ultimately toxic for both of them. The truth that emerged was that sometimes love is not enough. Sometimes two people can genuinely care about each other, can commit to a marriage, can build a family together, and still be fundamentally incompatible. Sometimes the most loving thing that two people can do is acknowledge that truth and let each other go. For Nicole, the divorce represented a kind of liberation. She no longer had to be the guardian of Keith's sobriety. She no longer had to carry the weight of trying to manage his behavior or control his environment. She could be a mother to her children without the layer of anxiety that had come from trying to protect them from a father she had learned to distrust. She could, perhaps, learn to trust that people could be trusted, that recovery could be real without constant monitoring, and that love did not have to mean control. For Keith, the divorce represented a reclamation of his autonomy and his dignity. He was no longer being managed or monitored. He could rebuild his relationship with his children on his own terms, as an equal parent rather than a managed adult. He could focus on his music and his recovery without the constant undercurrent of suspicion and doubt. He could, perhaps, learn to trust that he was worthy of love without having to prove himself constantly. The story of Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban's marriage is ultimately a story about the limits of love. It is a reminder that Hollywood fairy tales, like all fairy tales, have a price. It is a story about how the desperate desire to build a perfect family can sometimes blind us to the needs of the people we love most. It is a story about how trauma, left unhealed, can shape every relationship that comes after it, and how sometimes the most courageous thing we can do is acknowledge when something is not working and have the strength to let it go. In the months following their divorce announcement, both Nicole and Keith have continued to heal. Nicole has spoken about finding peace, about the importance of therapy and self-reflection, and about rebuilding her relationship with her children on healthier terms. Keith has thrown himself into his music and has spoken about the liberation that comes from being honest, from stopping the performance, and from allowing himself to be vulnerable. Their children, Sunday and Faith, are navigating their own journey through their parents' separation, and both Nicole and Keith have made clear that their commitment to co-parenting and to being present in their children's lives remains absolute. In interviews, they have spoken about putting aside their own feelings to ensure that their children know they are loved unconditionally by both parents. This is the truth that Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban's marriage finally reveals, that sometimes, the most honest ending is also the most painful one. Sometimes love means letting go. Sometimes the bravest thing two people can do is stop pretending and start healing. What do you think about their story? Do you believe they made the right choice? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you think about one of Hollywood's most complex relationships. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the real story behind Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban's divorce, please make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more celebrity documentaries and intimate stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload, and check out the next recommended video on your screen. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.